She was the Alpha Queen's silent servant, until the Alpha King found her marks on her skin. The kingdom of Werewolf lay beneath an eternal twilight. Even at noon, the sky shimmered in shades of deep violet and silver, as though the sun had forgotten to rise. Towering castles of black stone stretched into the sky, their spires crowned with glimmering obsidian. From the highest towers, the Alpha Queen ruled with precision and cold elegance. Her court was a place of whispers, shadows, and carefully measured steps. In such a place, one could vanish without a trace if one moved wrongly. Among the courtiers, there was one who seemed almost invisible. Elara, a young servant, moved quietly along the halls, her presence barely acknowledged by the nobles who passed her. She bore no jewel, no sign of rank, and yet her hands and forearms carried marks, strange jagged scars that twisted like branches of a dark tree. She had hidden them under long sleeves since her earliest memory, for no one could understand the pain they carried or the story they told. Elara knew silence was safer than words. Every smile, every nod, was measured. Every glance toward her was carefully avoided, except for the Queen herself. The Alpha Queen noticed everything, and her eyes were like twin knives, cutting through pretense and pride. Elara had learned long ago that to survive in this place meant to be nothing more than shadow, unseen and unheard. On the day the Alpha King arrived, the court was alive with tension. Kylan, the ruler of the Northern Pack, was a man of legendary power. His hair was black as midnight, his eyes like molten gold that seemed to pierce through the layers of lies and fear that cloaked the world. Rumors followed him wherever he went, of battles fought and won, of enemies reduced to dust, and of hearts that bent and broke under his gaze. Elara had heard the stories. She had also heard that no one had dared to look him directly in the eyes and lived to tell the tale. And yet, when Kylan entered the great hall, Elara found herself rooted to the spot. Her pulse quickened, not with fear, but with a strange, unnameable recognition. The king moved through the hall with an aura of command that made even the Alpha Queen pause. He stopped before the rows of servants, his gaze scanning faces with uncanny precision. When it fell upon Elara, the moment stretched into something fragile and eternal. He saw her marks, the jagged scars along her skin. His golden eyes narrowed slightly, and for a heartbeat, the usual calm that surrounded him faltered. Elara lowered her gaze instinctively. Her hands, folded in front of her, shook slightly. No one had ever looked at her that way. Not with recognition, not with curiosity mingled with something darker, something powerful that made the air feel heavier. "Step forward," Kylan commanded, his voice low, smooth, and unyielding. Every breath in the hall seemed to hold. Elara obeyed, moving with careful steps that echoed softly against the marble floor. She felt the gazes of the nobles and servants alike, and yet she could not look away from him. His presence was like the pull of a storm, unavoidable and consuming. Kylan reached out a hand and, without a word, traced the line of her marks with a finger gloved in black leather. The touch was gentle, yet it sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with cold. Memories she had long buried flickered at the edges of her mind, visions of fire, shadow, and voices calling her name across time. She tried to pull back, but the king's hand stayed there, firm and deliberate, as though he were reading a story written in her flesh. "These marks," Kylan murmured, almost to himself, "they are not of this world." "Not of this age." Alara's lips parted, but no words came. She wanted to ask him how he knew, why he looked at her as though she were more than she had ever dared to be. But fear kept her silent, and the Queen's gaze from across the hall reminded her that curiosity could be dangerous. "Bring her to the chamber of the northern wing," Kylan said, turning his head as if deciding something in that instant. Alone. Elara obeyed, her steps faltering slightly. As she walked, the murmurs of the servants rose behind her. Rumors would fly tonight, she knew. Every handmaid and footman would whisper, asking what the king saw in the silent servant. She had lived her life in the shadows, and now those shadows seemed to shrink around her, leaving her exposed and vulnerable. The northern wing was quiet, its stone walls lined with tapestries depicting ancient battles and kings long forgotten. Kalen waited at the center, his posture relaxed, but every line of him exuded authority. Alara felt the air thicken as she entered. "You are not just a servant, are you?" Kalen asked, his golden eyes scanning her face, trying to unravel the layers she had built around herself. Alara shook her head slowly. I do as I am told," she whispered. Her voice was soft, almost inaudible, but it seemed to reach him in a way words rarely did. He studied her, and for a moment, there was no sound except the faint hum of the wind outside the tall windows. "No," he said finally. "You do far more than that. Your silence, it hides something powerful. Something dangerous. The words should have terrified her, and in truth, they did. But they also stirred something else, a spark of hope, of recognition. Someone had noticed her. Someone had seen the truth beneath the layers of obedience and fear. Kalen's gaze fell again on her marks, tracing the jagged lines with the tip of a finger. They glowed faintly under the dim light, an otherworldly shimmer that only he seemed to notice. Alara's breath caught in her throat. She had never seen them glow before, and she did not understand why they responded to him.
"You carry a story in your skin," Kalen murmured. "A story that belongs to more than this kingdom."
Perhaps more than time itself. Alara wanted to pull away, to hide again, but something in his presence held her still. "Oh." His voice was a quiet command, but not one of authority, of inevitability. She felt as though she had been waiting for him, for this moment, even if she did not know it herself. "Why? Why me?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Kalen did not answer immediately. Instead, he walked closer, the shadows of the room curling around him like smoke. "Because the world does not forget, Alara. And I do not forget either." The words sent a shiver down her spine. She did not understand their meaning, but they felt heavy with destiny, with an unspoken bond that stretched beyond sight. Suddenly, a soft wind blew through the open window, scattering the tapestries and carrying with it a faint whisper of voices. Alara felt a jolt, a memory of a fire long ago, of voices calling her name across some vast shadowed distance. She stumbled, gripping the edge of a table for support. Kalen reached out instinctively, steadying her with a firm hand. Their eyes met, and in that silent exchange, something shifted. Neither spoke, yet both understood that this moment had changed everything. "You must learn to control it," Kalen said softly, "before it controls you." Control? Her marks? Power she did not understand. She wanted to ask 1,000 questions, but the words failed her. She nodded, though she did not know if it was in agreement or in submission. Kylan let her go, stepping back into the shadows of the room. "Sleep now," he said. "Tomorrow, everything begins. You will see who you truly are." As he turned to leave, Alara noticed that the faint glow of her marks lingered, pulsing gently like the heartbeat of some hidden magic. She felt fear, awe, and an odd sense of anticipation mingling in her chest. For the first time in her life, she did not feel invisible. That night, alone in her small chamber, Alara could not sleep. She traced the jagged lines on her skin with trembling fingers, trying to understand their story. She thought of Kalen, of his golden eyes that had seen more than she had ever shown, and as the moonlight spilled across her bed, her marks began to glow again, brighter this time, as though responding to a call she could not hear but felt deep in her bones.
A shadow moved across the far wall, though the chamber was empty.
Elara froze. Was it a trick of the light, or something more? Her heartbeat thundered in her chest as she realized that her life, the quiet life she had lived in the shadows, was over. Something ancient had stirred, drawn to her power. And Kalen, he was not merely a king. He was a harbinger, a guide, and perhaps the only one who could walk beside her through the darkness that now awaited. And in the silence of the night, with the castle asleep around her, Elara felt the first true pull of destiny, a pull that would change her forever. The marks on her skin pulsed, glowing brighter, whispering secrets of a past she did not fully remember, and a future she could not yet escape. The next morning the castle of Werewolf seemed colder than ever. The sun's silver light barely filtered through the stained glass windows, painting the corridors in shades of gray and violet. Elara moved quietly through the halls, carrying trays of food and water, her steps careful, her head bowed. Yet the memory of last night haunted her. Kalen's gaze, his touch on her marks, and the way her own power had responded in ways she did not understand. She tried to speak to no one, avoided all eyes, and hid her trembling hands beneath long sleeves, but whispers followed her wherever she went. The servants speculated. The maids whispered in corners, and even the guards exchanged cautious glances. Something about her had changed overnight, though none could name what it was. Elara's life had always been one of silence. She had learned that shadows were safer than words, that obedience kept her alive, and that attention brought danger. Yet now she felt a strange pull from the world, as if invisible threads tugged at her chest, guiding her toward something she could not yet name. In the quiet of the northern wing, Kalen awaited her. The golden light from his eyes seemed softer in the morning, yet still commanding, still filled with something impossible to ignore. "Do you understand what your marks are?" he asked as she entered, his voice low, echoing slightly off the cold stone walls. Elara shook her head. I do not. They've always been there." "I remember nothing before the day I arrived at the Alpha Queen's court." Kalen nodded slowly, as if he had expected this answer. "You carry an ancient power," he said. "It is older than the Alpha Queen herself, older than this castle. These marks are a sign, a key. They will lead you, guide you, and warn you, if you learn to listen." Elara's hands tightened at her sides. The words felt like a weight pressing into her chest. She wanted to run, to hide, yet something in Kalen's presence held her rooted. "A key to what?" she whispered. "To yourself," he said simply, stepping closer, "and to a path you cannot yet see. That is why I am here."
"You are not alone in this, Elara. Not anymore."
The warmth in his voice was strange, alien even. All her life she had been invisible, unnoticed, and now she felt as if she were being pulled into the center of a storm she could neither predict nor escape. Kalen held out his hand, not in command, but as an invitation. "Show me your marks."
"Let me help you understand them."
Fear and instinct urged her to pull back, to hide beneath her sleeves. But something deeper inside, an echo of memory she did not understand, pushed her forward. Slowly, trembling, she lifted her sleeve, revealing the jagged, twisting lines that ran along her forearm and shoulder. Kalen's golden eyes studied the marks, and for a moment his expression softened. "You were chosen long before this life, long before you arrived at the Queen's court. These marks, they are a map, a record of trials, of sacrifices, of power waiting to be awakened." Elara's lips parted, but no words came. Fear and awe fought inside her, and the weight of destiny pressed upon her chest. She had never imagined herself important, never imagined that her existence carried meaning beyond serving quietly in the shadows. And yet, The man before her, Kaelin, the Alpha King, spoke as if her life were a story written in the stars.
"Why me?" she whispered. "Why would someone like you care?"
Because you are bound to me, not by chains, not by law, but by something older, stronger, something your marks remember, even if you do not. The air in the room seemed to hum with quiet energy. Elara's marks pulsed faintly, glowing with a light that matched the golden intensity of Kaelin's eyes. She felt a shiver run through her body, a mix of fear and wonder. Something inside her stirred, as though waking from a long, endless sleep. "I don't understand," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You will," Kaelin said firmly. "But first you must learn to feel, to trust, to accept what is coming. Your power is dangerous, yes, but it is also your salvation."
Elara tried to speak again, but a sudden sharp pain ran along her arm.
Her marks flared brightly, and the light seemed to rise into the air, dancing and twisting like shadows given life. The room darkened as if the castle itself were reacting to her awakening. Kaelin moved closer, instinctively steadying her. "Breathe," he said. "Do not fight it. Let it guide you." Her vision blurred with the glow, and for a fleeting instant she saw flashes of a past she did not know she had. A fire that burned across mountains, wolves howling under a blood-red moon, voices calling her name across fields of shadow. She gasped, clutching at Kaelin's arm for support. "You see it?" Kaelin whispered. "Your past and your destiny." Tears stung her eyes. "I don't know who I am," she admitted, her voice breaking.
"I don't even know if I can be anything more than this." Kaelin's hand covered hers, firm and grounding. "You can."
You will. You just have to choose to believe it.
For hours they stayed in the northern wing, Kaelin teaching her to feel the rhythm of her power, to sense the energy that flowed through her marks, and to listen to the whispers of the magic she had carried since birth.
Elara's fear slowly transformed into awe.
She began to understand that the marks were not a curse, but a guide, a map of her inner strength waiting to be awakened. Yet, even as she learned, the castle outside their chamber remained alive with unseen eyes. Whispers of her awakening had already begun to spread. Servants spoke in hushed tones, guards exchanged cautious glances, and somewhere in the shadows figures watched, waiting for an opportunity to claim or destroy the one who now held the key to a power older than the throne itself. As night fell, Kaelin left her chamber briefly to ensure the halls were safe. Elara sat by the window, tracing the jagged lines on her arm, feeling the pulse of energy that now flowed through her. The glow of her marks had dimmed, but the memory of the warmth lingered. She realized something terrifying and thrilling at once. She was no longer a servant in the shadows. She was part of a story much larger than herself, a story that had begun long before she was born, and one that would not end quietly. Suddenly, a shadow passed across the room. Elara froze, heart racing. She looked toward the corner, but the room was empty. And yet, she felt it, a presence, dark and cold, lingering just beyond her vision. She took a cautious step back. "Who's there?" she whispered, though no one answered. Then she heard it, a soft, almost imperceptible whisper, carried on the wind that rattled the window panes. "Elara," her breath caught. It was not Kaelin. She knew his presence, felt his energy, but this voice was different, older, deeper, and filled with intent she could not understand. The glow of her marks pulsed again, responding to the call as though they remembered something she had forgotten. At that moment, Kaelin returned, his golden eyes blazing in the dim light. He sensed the change immediately, stepping forward, hand outstretched. "Elara! Focus!" he commanded. "Do not let it pull you. You are stronger than whatever this is." The shadow flickered near the far wall, twisting unnaturally, and Elara's pulse raced. She felt a surge of energy from within her, raw and unrefined, pushing against fear and uncertainty. Kaylin's hand found hers, grounding her, and together they drew the power back into her marks, the glow fading as the presence withdrew, disappearing into the corners of the room.
Ella collapsed to her knees, gasping.
What was that? She whispered, trembling. Kaylin knelt beside her, his expression grave. It is coming, he said. The forces that seek you, they have been waiting for this awakening. And now that they have sensed your power, they will not let you remain hidden. Elara's mind spun. She had always known the court held dangers, but she had never imagined magic, shadows, and predestined battles. Fear and awe mingled within her, leaving her feeling small and yet impossibly alive. Then what do we do? She asked softly. Kaylin's eyes softened for a moment, and he brushed a strand of hair from her face. We prepare, and we survive. But most of all,
you must trust yourself.
You are no longer a shadow, Elara. You are the light that will guide the path.
The words settled over her like a promise, a spark of hope in a world of twilight. Yet even as she absorbed them, she felt the pull of destiny tugging at her once more. The shadow was gone for now, but it had marked her. It had whispered her name, and somewhere beyond the walls of the castle, forces older than the kingdom itself were stirring, drawn to her awakening. That night, as Elara lay awake in her chamber, she traced the glowing lines on her arm one final time. She realized that the life she had known, the life of silence, of shadows, of hidden servitude, was gone forever. The marks were no longer just scars. They were a map, a key, a warning, and a promise. And she knew with a certainty that frightened her that Kaylin was not merely her teacher or protector. He was part of her destiny, bound to her in ways she could not yet understand. And somewhere beyond the walls, in the shadows of the northern wing, the soft, imperceptible whisper returned, calling her name with a power that made the air itself tremble. The wind howled through the northern gates of the castle, carrying with it a bitter chill that cut through the armor of guards and courtiers alike. The kingdom of Werewolf, even in daylight, seemed a land trapped between shadow and light. Elara stood at the edge of the courtyard, the jagged lines on her skin faintly glowing beneath her sleeves. Her heart raced as Kaylin approached her, his cloak billowing behind him like the shadow of a storm.
You must come with me, Kaylin said, his golden eyes steady and unwavering.
You cannot stay here, not while the forces that seek you awaken. Elara's pulse quickened, and she took a step back. Leave the court? But the queen? Her voice faltered. She had served the Alpha Queen all her life. Loyalty, discipline, and silence had been her companions. To abandon that now felt like stepping off a cliff into darkness. The queen cannot protect you, Kaylin replied firmly.
No one here can. Only I can guide you, teach you to control your power before it controls you.
Fear battled with curiosity, and with a strange pull she could not name, she felt herself drawn toward him. Yet the weight of the court's expectations pressed against her, whispering in her mind to obey, to stay. I don't know if I can leave, she said softly, her voice trembling. Kaylin stepped closer, the air around him charged with his presence. You do not have a choice, he said, though his tone lacked cruelty. You are bound to this path, Elara. It is not merely your power. They want you because of it. If we delay, the shadow will strike, and nothing in this castle can stop it. Elara's hands shook as she realized the truth. Her life of silence, of shadows, was over. Something older, darker, and infinitely powerful had awakened within her. And Kaylin was no longer just a king. He was a guide, a protector, and perhaps the only one who could keep her safe. With a deep, shaky breath, she nodded.
I will go, she whispered.
Kaylin's eyes softened, but he did not smile.
Good.
But understand this, What lies ahead is not the world you know. There will be danger, shadows that twist reality, and tests that will push you to the edge. You must trust yourself. And me. As they mounted black horses and rode through the castle gates, the air seemed to grow heavier, the twilight sky darkening with sudden clouds that swirled unnaturally. The castle, once a place of routine and quiet control, shrank behind them, its towers like silent witnesses to their departure. The journey led them into the shadowed forest, a place where sunlight barely touched the ground, and twisted trees arched like skeletal hands over the narrow path. The forest hummed with magic, the whispers of unseen beings brushing against Alara's senses. She felt the pulse of her own power respond to the world around her, subtle and insistent, like a heartbeat syncing with the land itself.
Focus on your breathing, Kalen instructed, his voice cutting through the sounds of the forest.
Feel your power not as a curse, but as a gift. It will guide you. Alara closed her eyes and drew a deep breath. The energy in her marks pulsed in response, faint glimmers of light flickering along her skin. She felt it flow through her veins, an unseen current connecting her to the world, to the shadows, and to Kalen.
You are stronger than you know, Kalen said quietly, watching her.
The power inside you is dangerous, yes, but it is also your greatest weapon. Only by embracing it will you survive what is coming. Alara opened her eyes, meeting his gaze. And if I fail? She asked, a tremor in her voice. You will not, Kalen replied, his voice low and commanding. Because I will not let you fail, and because you are stronger than you believe. For hours, they rode through the forest, and Alara began to feel a strange sense of belonging with him, despite the danger. Every glance, every word, carried weight, tension, and something more, an unspoken connection that neither could yet name. She began to sense that Kalen's interest in her went beyond protection or curiosity. He saw her as more than a servant, more than a girl hiding in shadows. Night fell, and the forest became alive with eerie sounds, twisted branches scraping against one another, strange cries echoing from the darkness. A sudden rustle made Alara pull her cloak tighter around her. Shadows shifted unnaturally, and the whispers she had first felt in the castle now returned, louder, more insistent. Stay close, Kalen ordered, his hand brushing against hers as he guided the horse. They are near. Alara's pulse quickened. Who are they? She whispered. Creatures of shadow, Kalen replied, his voice tight. Drawn to your power. They want to consume it, to claim it for themselves.
If we falter, they will not hesitate. A low growl echoed through the trees.
The darkness seemed to twist, forming shapes that moved with intent, circling them unseen. Alara felt the pulse in her mark surge, responding to the threat, as though the power inside her was alive and aware. Kalen dismounted, his golden eyes glowing, the air around him shimmering with his alpha energy. You must step down, he said.
I will hold them. Alara's heart raced. I can... No. Kalen interrupted gently but firmly.
You must learn patience and control first. Trust me. He moved into the shadows, his presence like fire against the darkness. The creatures, sensing his strength, hesitated, then lunged. Shadows twisted into monstrous forms, their eyes glinting with malice. Kalen moved with grace and precision, his voice commanding the shadows, bending them back. Alara watched, breathless, as his power clashed with the dark forces. Every movement he made was poetry and strength combined, a dance of dominance and control that left her both fearful and fascinated. She realized then that Kalen was not just a king. He was a force of nature, and she was drawn irresistibly to him, not just because of fear or awe, but because something deep within her recognized him. The fight lasted what felt like hours. Alara, though frightened, felt the energy in her marks respond to the struggle. She sensed the shadows retreating slightly, as though acknowledging her presence, acknowledging that she was more than she had ever believed. Finally, the forest fell silent. The creatures had withdrawn, melting back into the shadows from which they had emerged. Kaelin returned to her side, breathing heavily, his golden eyes scanning the darkness. "You saw that," he said quietly. "That was the first test. The shadows are drawn to you, and you will face many more. But you survived, and that is what matters." Elara nodded, her hands still trembling. I felt it," she whispered. "The power. It wanted to protect me. Yes," Kaelin said, his voice softening. "And that is your first lesson. The power inside you is not just for destruction. It is part of who you are, and you must learn to trust it." For the rest of the night, they made camp beneath the trees. Kaelin sat beside her, his gaze fixed on her, as if trying to understand every thought behind her golden brown eyes. Elara felt a warmth in his presence, something she had never felt before. He was fierce, commanding, and yet gentle in ways she could not name.
"You trust me?"
he asked softly. Elara hesitated. She had trusted no one her entire life, not even herself. But looking into his eyes, seeing the strength and the concern within them, she felt something shift. I think I can," she said quietly. Kaelin nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "That is enough for now. Trust is a beginning, not the end." They sat in silence, listening to the whispering forest, feeling the pulse of magic that lingered in the night. Elara traced the lines on her arms, feeling the energy thrumming beneath her skin. She realized that her life of shadows, of hidden fear, was over. She was no longer a servant in silence. She was becoming something more. Someone who could face shadows, someone who could wield the power she had long feared. And as she drifted into a restless sleep, she felt the shadow stir once more. Somewhere, deep in the forest, unseen eyes watched her. Forces older than the kingdom, older than the Alpha line itself, were awakening. They had felt the surge of her power, had sensed her connection to Kaelin, and they would not rest until they had tested her fully. Elara dreamed of fire and wolves, of voices calling her name, and of a path she could not yet see. And when she awoke, she knew the journey ahead would demand everything from her: courage, trust, and a strength she had not yet discovered. But she also knew that she would not face it alone. Kaelin was beside her, and together they would step into a world of shadows and light, of danger and destiny, of trials that would shape them both. And somewhere beyond the trees and the dark edges of the forest, the soft, imperceptible whisper returned, stronger than before, calling her name, marking the beginning of a challenge that would change the fate of the kingdom forever. The shadowed forest stretched endlessly before them, dark and alive, yet the rising sun painted streaks of silver and violet across the sky. Elara's heart pounded as she walked beside Kaelin, her hands trembling slightly, though the power in her marks pulsed with steady warmth. She was no longer the silent servant of the Alpha Queen. She was awakening to her own strength, and she felt it deep in her bones. Kaelin's golden eyes scanned the horizon constantly. His presence was a steady anchor, fierce yet protective. And Elara realized that their connection went beyond destiny. It was a bond that pulled them together, strong and unyielding.
"We're close," Kaelin said quietly, his voice low and certain.
"The source of the shadows, it waits in the ruined throne hall. Once we reach it, there will be no turning back."
Elara nodded, swallowing her fear.
She had been through tests, confronted powers that defied understanding, and felt the darkness brush against her soul. Yet nothing had prepared her for the sight that greeted them as they emerged from the forest. The throne hall lay in ruin, its stone columns cracked, banners shredded, and the air thick with lingering magic. Shadows twisted along the walls, moving with intent and malice. Kalen drew his sword, the golden edge gleaming in the dim light. "Stay close," he warned.
Do not let them surround you. Remember your power.
Trust it, and trust yourself. Alara took a deep breath. She had learned to listen to her marks, to feel the pulse of energy flowing through her. Now, more than ever, she knew she could not hide. She stepped forward, feeling the light in her veins grow stronger, warming her skin, steadying her trembling hands. The shadows coalesced into figures, creatures of darkness, twisted by magic and malice. Their eyes glimmered like black fire, and their movements were swift, unnatural. Alara's first instinct was fear, but she forced it down, grounding herself in the power that had been waiting inside her for so long. "Together," Kalen said, his hand brushing hers for a moment. The contact was electric, a spark that ran through both of them. "We face this together." Alara nodded, and the glow of her marks intensified. She could feel the energy responding to Kalen's strength, their power intertwining. The shadows lunged, and she met them with a force she had not known she possessed. Light burst from her marks, striking the creatures, causing them to recoil and hiss. Kalen moved with deadly precision, his sword slicing through shadows, as if cutting through mist. Every strike he made was mirrored by the rhythm of her power, a dance of light and strength that flowed between them. They were not merely fighting, they were becoming one force, a bond that no darkness could sever. A massive shadow loomed at the center of the hall, taller and darker than the rest. Its presence was suffocating, and Alara felt the chill of ancient power pressing against her. Her marks flared, reacting to the threat. She realized then that this was not just a test. It was the true measure of her strength.
"You must face it," Kalen said, his voice steady but urgent. "Do not falter."
The shadows feed on fear. You are stronger than they are. Alara drew in a deep breath, closing her eyes for a moment. She pictured her past, her journey, the lessons she had learned from the king, and the strength that had always been inside her. She let it flow through her marks, letting her power shine outward like a beacon. The shadow roared, lunging toward her with teeth and claws of darkness. Alara met it head-on, her marks burning with light. The clash of power shook the hall, stones trembling, shadows writhing, and for a moment, time itself seemed to hold its breath. Kalen joined her side, and together they pushed back the darkness. Each step, each strike, each pulse of energy was synchronized, the bond between them unbreakable. Alara felt a surge of confidence, a certainty that she had never known. She was not a servant. She was a force to be reckoned with. The shadow recoiled, screaming in fury, but it was not finished. It shifted, becoming more solid, more monstrous. Kalen's eyes met hers. "Remember," he said, "do not fight alone. We are one."
Alara took a step forward, feeling the connection between them.
The marks on her skin shone brighter than ever, radiating light that cut through the darkness. She reached out, and Kalen's hand met hers. The energy surged between them, a pulse of power that strengthened them both.
"Now,"
he said, and together they unleashed their combined strength. Light and alpha energy burst from them, striking the monstrous shadow. The hall shook, and a deafening roar echoed as the darkness disintegrated, scattering into nothingness. Silence fell. The ruins were still, the air clearing of the oppressive weight of magic. Alara sank to her knees, exhausted but alive. Kalen knelt beside her, his golden eyes softening as he brushed a strand of hair from her face.
"You did it," he said softly. "You faced the darkness,
and you prevailed." Tears pricked her eyes. "I couldn't have done it without you," she whispered. Her voice trembled, but it carried a newfound strength.
I never thought I could be this powerful.
Kaelin smiled faintly, the first warmth she had seen in his eyes. You were always powerful, Ilara. You just needed to believe it, and now you are free to shape your destiny. Ilara looked around at the ruined throne hall. The shadows were gone, but the destruction reminded her of the cost of power, the fragility of life, and the weight of responsibility. Blood. And now he faced the darkness, but blood and the change. That was but the kingdom. But the kingdom itself would never be the same. Kaelin rose and extended his hand to her. Come, he said. The kingdom awaits. And now, you are not alone. Together, we will face what comes next.
Ilara took his hand, feeling the warmth and strength in his grip.
For the first time, she felt truly seen, not as a servant, not as a shadow, but as herself. The bond between them was more than power. It was trust, understanding, and something deeper that neither needed to name yet. They emerged from the ruins into the soft glow of dawn. The kingdom, though scarred by shadows, seemed alive with possibility. Ilara's marks shimmered faintly, a reminder of the trials she had overcome and the path that lay ahead. As they rode back toward the castle, Kaelin spoke quietly.
You have changed, Ilara.
And so has the world around us. Nothing will be the same. Ilara nodded, feeling a sense of clarity she had never known.
I am ready, she said softly.
To face whatever comes, with you. Kaelin's gaze softened, and for the first time, a genuine smile touched his lips. Then we begin a new chapter, he said, one we write together. Their journey back was quiet, filled with a peaceful tension. The kind that comes from knowing danger still exists, but that together they are stronger than any force in the world. Ilara felt a sense of belonging she had never known. She was no longer invisible. She was not a servant. She was a queen of her own destiny, and Kaelin was no longer a distant ruler. He was her partner, her guide, and the one who had helped her discover herself. As the castle walls came into view, a faint glow shimmered across her skin. Her marks pulsed, a gentle reminder of the power she carried and the bond she shared with Kaelin. She understood now that her strength was not just magic. It was choice, courage, and love intertwined. The Alpha Queen awaited them, her expression unreadable. But Ilara no longer feared her. She had faced shadows, controlled her power, and embraced her destiny. She was ready to face the court, the kingdom, and whatever trials the future held. Kaelin dismounted and offered his hand once more. Ilara took it, and together they entered the throne hall. The courtiers gasped at the sight of them. The shadows destroyed, the servant transformed into something radiant and strong, and the Alpha King at her side. The queen's eyes met Ilara's, sharp and assessing, but for the first time Ilara did not flinch. She stood tall, her marks glowing faintly beneath her sleeves, and met the queen's gaze with calm confidence. "Rise, Ilara," Kaelin said softly. You are no longer a servant. You are a force to be reckoned with. Ilara stepped forward, feeling the strength within her and the bond with Kaelin anchoring her. She understood now that power was not just what she could wield. It was who she chose to be and who she chose to stand beside. And as the sun rose fully over the kingdom of Werewolf, painting the walls in gold and violet, Ilara knew that she had found not only her strength but her place in the world. She had faced shadows, discovered her power, and embraced her destiny. The kingdom was forever changed, but so was she. And for the first time, she felt truly alive. Her marks pulsed one last time, bright and steady, as if whispering a promise. That the bond she shared with Kaelin and the power within her would guide them both into a future they could face together.